As a dungeon master, D&D is the kind of hobby that you pretty much take with you absolutely everywhere you go. Even out here on a cruise, I can't help but still be thinking about how I'm going to make one of my 8+ games that I run every week a little bit more perfect when I get back to my home studio, right? Which is why Mark Tan's question about what a perfect game of D&D looks like is so relevant today. Thanks, Mark Tan, for asking the question, and thank you to the Tank Class supporters who not only get to watch my answer a couple of weeks early, but selected this topic from amongst the bevy of others that had been submitted. As you might expect, the answer to the question is that there's no such thing as a perfect game of Dungeons and Dragons. But just because there's no such thing as a perfect game doesn't mean that we shouldn't chase it. When I think about what a perfect game of D&D would look like, while plenty of jokes run around in my head about how it probably involves appropriate bribes being brought to the GM in terms of snacks of my favorite sort, just so you know, that's pizza, I think really that a perfect game of D&D is the kind of game that you hear about from your players throughout the week, from when you played to when your next session is. It's the kind of game of D&D that leaves you hyped knowing that your players had a great time and that they are excited to come back and do more. It's the kind of game where there are questions that are left unanswered, where the pacing has been fast and furious, alternating with slow and intensely meaningful moments. And everything has just gone perfectly according to plan. And yet, even when a session like that rolls around and I get to see in my favorite moments channel people talking about their favorite things that happened at the table, when I get to hear praise heaped directly saying that it was a top tier fight, the best that they've ever had, it still isn't enough. Because perfect doesn't really exist in Dungeons and Dragons, because there's just always one little thing that could have gone that tiny bit better. Maybe something could have gone a little bit faster, a little bit smoother. I could have thought quicker on my feet to invent a detail that was important, etc., etc., etc. Perfect in D&D is the unattainable goal that drives us onward while also sometimes leaving us a little bit depressed. If you're anything like me, you take everything that happens at your table personally and take the blame for everything that goes wrong at your sessions, which admittedly means you get to take the credit for everything that goes right at your tables. But more often than not, it seems to be the negative things that stick around with us and leave us in the dumps rather than the positives that buoy us up for the next session. And so the chase for perfection can be harmful for some people more than it might be for others, depending upon how you personally handle that kind of pull and push between the negatives that are riding on you and the positives that are pulling you forward. And so it's important that we keep our own mental health and sanity in mind when we're chasing perfection, but that we do consider the possibility that there is still room for improvement. And I think that that's really what perfection should look like at our tables, is an improvement over what happened before. If everything ran smoothly 10 sessions in a row, is that 10th session smoother than the first one? If one session runs poorly and one runs well, what is it that made the difference between those two? How can we highlight it and how can we focus on that for the future? Chasing perfection means chasing the understanding of how the rules interplay, how tension works, how the pacing works, how our individual players interact. For me, chasing perfection means that not only am I trying to run a better game when I'm running the game, but it also means that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about how the game works and what makes it a good game. I read a lot of different gurus on the subject matter. I absorb books that are designed maybe not for tabletop role-playing games, but are designed to help us understand the psychology of games and of players and of what goes on behind the scenes to make something fun. There are a number of great guys out there that have dived deep on this that I truly respect for one aspect or another of their knowledge base, but I found that ultimately the one problem that I really don't like when it comes to our efforts to chase perfection is people who cite their way as being the only way of reaching it. Because for me, I think that D&D being perfect is going to be different depending upon your table, the relationship you have with your players, who you are as a DM yourself. One person's perfect game could be wildly slapstick comedy compared to somebody else's gritty realism fantasy. And both of those games might be approaching perfection by improving towards those two very, very different mediums of the exact same role playing game. And so it's important that we don't harsh on other people's vibe, the thing that they enjoy most. And I think that's something that I have to really pick and choose when I'm trying to chase perfection, that I don't let myself fall into the trap of thinking that this idea of perfection that I have is actually perfect. I have gotten into a lot of different troubles over the years where I have said that this is what makes for a fun game and situation when my players were not enjoying it. My wife, in particular, is the fastest one ever to tell me when she's not having fun at the table and when it's my fault, which is useful for me, honestly, because it gives me that opportunity to grow, to recognize what it is that drives her, to realize that she might not even know essentially what it is that drives her, but she still definitely knows what she's enjoying and what she's not enjoying. And it's my job to find the path forward that is going to lead her to have more fun next week than she had this week at the gaming table. I think that we can chase perfection in a good way by analyzing what we have done in the past, but also by opening ourselves up to experimentation, to being willing to try new things at the table, to be willing to say that maybe the way you've always run it isn't actually the way that is best for your table, that it might be a good way, but there might be a better way, and be willing to fail occasionally by experimenting with something that's outside of your comfort zone or the comfort zone of your players. Be willing to say, oh man, that session sucked, and I'm really sorry about that, but it was because I was trying this new thing, and obviously that's not something that I've mastered, or it's not something that we enjoy, and so we're gonna like scratch that and move forward with something different next week, and keep experimenting, keeping willing to try new things. Don't poo-poo on other people's stuff. I hear a lot of edition war hatred where people are like, this system sucks and you suck at it, but you suck because you play this system, and everything would be better if you just played this other game. And for some people, maybe that's true, that that game fits their style better. But ultimately, I think that any of the games that we enjoy playing, whatever edition is our personal favorite, we can build it towards the feel and vibe that we're interested in if we want to put in the work. And if that's not something that's for you, then don't get on somebody else's case just because that's what they're enjoying. I think that we all should give ourselves and each other a little bit of grace in the hunt for perfection and be willing to allow people to make those mistakes, because by making mistakes, we move closer towards that perfection. Does it matter that I don't think I'll ever reach a perfect game? No. In fact, I think that if I could, that would be worse for me, because a perfect game feels like a natural goal to drive towards. It would be really disappointing if I could get to a point where there was nothing to fix. If I ever got to the point where I was like, I'm so good at this, I don't need to improve, that's when I know that one, I really need to improve way more than I think I do. And two, maybe it's time to hang up my DMing hat and take a break. Because if I think that I've got it all down and that everything is going exactly right, I'm deluding myself and I'm killing the joy of improvement that is such a drive for so many different DMs. So, Mark Tan, I'm sorry, but it is true. The answer to what does a perfect game looks like is it's different for every table, and you'll never really achieve it. For me, a perfect game is a game that has my players excited and pumped, and they walk away happy. And if they walk away happy, then that's as close to perfect as I feel like I'll ever achieve, and that's okay for me. I'm ready to try and make them a little more happy next week. And I look forward, when I get back off of this cruise, to doing just that. Thanks so much for the question today. And if you're looking to run a perfect session and to improve your game week after week, then make sure you've checked out this video on radical responsibility and how that can help you to improve your games of Dungeons and Dragons. Otherwise, if you've got a question, pop it in the comments below, and maybe it'll make it into the musings or into this month's Q&A. Either way, thanks for watching. Happy adventuring.